You've tried the protocols, the lab tests, the perfect diet, the endless supplements, maybe even spent thousands chasing the missing piece. But still, the chronic pain or chronic illness lingers. What if the real key isn't in another test result or another quick fix, but in something far more foundational? Today, we're diving deep into the real roots of healing, the stories we tell ourselves about our health, and why so many people feel stuck despite doing all the right things. And to explore this, I couldn't have a better guest. Andrea Nakayama is an internationally recognized functional medicine nutritionist, educator, and speaker. She's the founder of Functional Nutrition Alliance and host of the award-winning 15-Minute Matrix podcast, where she's leading a revolution in how we approach chronic illness. Through her work, she's empowering both patients and practitioners to move beyond symptom chasing and instead harness systems biology, root cause methodology, and therapeutic partnerships to reclaim ownership of their health. She's trained thousands of practitioners worldwide, transforming the way we think about healing. I'm so excited for this conversation. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Unweaving Chronic Pain podcast. I am your host, Dr. Andrea Moore, founder of the Whole Self Integration Method, and I am here to take high achievers from a place of battling themselves to a place where they get to live life fully on their own terms. Because the reality is, you don't need to fix yourself. What you truly need are the tools to build resilience and nervous system capability so you can finally move through life with ease. If you are ready to end the battle and step into resilience, then it is time to book a Step into Resilience call with myself, where I will guide you through the next best steps for you to finally be able to living life on your own terms. You can book that by clicking the link in the show notes or going directly to drandreamoore.com/schedule. That's DrAndreaMoore.com/schedule. Can't wait to see you there. Hello, welcome, Andrea. I'm so excited to have you here today. How are you doing?
I'm good, and I'm thrilled to be here with you.
Thank you. Well, why don't you start with telling everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are?
Wow, quite a journey there. Well, I'm Andrea Nakayama. I'm a functional medicine nutritionist. I'm founder of the Functional Nutrition Alliance, where we train thousands of practitioners around the globe in the science and art of functional nutrition. And I'm also a practitioner of narrative medicine. And I'm loving the intersection of the functional medicine and narrative medicine worlds these days. And this all came into being for me way back when, over 20 years ago now, in April of 2000, when my late husband was diagnosed with a very aggressive brain tumor. I took what was an interest in food and in trying to regulate things about my own body that I didn't understand at the time and apply it to everything we were going through with his brain tumor treatment and the condition itself. So that is where it all started. At the time he was diagnosed, I was 7 weeks pregnant with our first and only child. So it was a time of real reckoning and recognizing where our medical system sometimes falls short. It does a lot, but it also falls short when there is a chronic condition. So there's certainly a lot I can talk into there, but that's the origin story of becoming the practitioner and the educator that I am today.
Yeah, and what a journey. And yeah, I just want to speak to just the power that you stepped into in that moment. I'm sure there was a ton of other emotions and things happening as well that I feel like never quite gets the attention, or we forget that that's all happening as well. But I think for so many listening who are experiencing chronic pain, chronic illness, there it's sometimes hard to remember that there can be this goodness that comes out of it or something else. It's not like we want it to happen or that it had to you know what I mean? I feel like some of those can really fall flat, but it's like it happened and there can be this positive shift that comes out of it. And I think that's just so powerful what you did with your circumstances. I just really want to
Yeah.
speak to that because that,
Thank you. Yeah, I think it can become like toxic positivity, right? If we're like
yes.
the silver lining, but I
Yeah.
I refer to it as post-traumatic growth. It's
Yeah.
that recognizing the reality of the trauma and also recognizing what needs to come forth from that trauma as well. And so for me, it was a real recognition of the gaps in our medical system. And I always like to remind people that I am not here to give fault to our medical system. It just isn't all the things that it needs to be for all the
Yeah.
people, especially because it's focused on acute care,
Mhm.
but also that there were so many blessings that came from the everyday experience, 2.5 years that he lived, which was 2 years past his prognosis, that we had together, that we had with our young son, who will be 24 a week from today as we're recording, and that I wanted to pay forth, that I wanted to really do something with what I had seen and learned and experienced. And so that post traumatic growth wasn't just a silver lining, it was an impetus, a passion, a purpose that really came about because of that experience. So I think it can happen. And what you're saying is so important, Andrea, and that it's a reminder that our pain can give way to possibility.
Yes, yes, yes. And I love what you said. There's like, it's not about toxic positivity because we're not about toxic positivity here. It's a full acceptance of the reality we're presented with. Sometimes that reality is really harsh.
Yes.
It's really brutal and unfair and unjust. And our options end up, I mean, to me, the first thing is always to feel and express what needs to be felt and expressed. And then from there to take that next step. And that can be a step into growth. I mean, or it can be a step into despair. And
Yeah.
I always tell, even if you step into despair, you can still always then feel the despair and then take the next step into growth. You know, it's like gets to be on your own pace, but yeah, I just want to recognize your ability to do that because that's hard. That's really, really
Yeah.
hard.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And so it's funny because we were talking about this a little bit before we started, but I felt like getting the invite from you to be on here felt like this full circle moment because unbeknownst to the person who was connecting us, I knew Andrea. And because I had actually taken her digestive intensive, which I don't know if that exists anymore, but it was like, I don't know, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. I can't even
It's been around for a while.
remember. Yeah. Because I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner. I don't talk about it like a ton on this podcast, but it was amazing. And one of the reasons I stepped out of the nutritional therapy world was because I felt like it became obsessed with
Mhm.
perfectionism.
Yeah.
And I feel like there are pieces from that course that really shaped the way I think and still think and really just drove me more into my passion, whereas meeting people where they are and really honing on the basics.
Yeah.
And so, why don't you speak a little bit to that? Because I know one of the big things that not so much in the nutritional therapy program, but all the continuing it afterwards, it felt like it was so like, you have to have this lab test and this lab test. And I was getting
Mhm.
clients who were like, literally like had spent $10,000 on lab testing. And they're like, I'm not feeling any better. So I felt like the universe was sending me a message of like, this is not where I want to go. And I felt like your program very much spoke to my instincts as it was and then doesn't just it was nice to have that confirmed as a very new practitioner back then.
Mm.
um
Yeah,
uh,
there's so much I have to say about
yes.
that. And I think like I'm just going to put the lab conversation aside for a moment, which we can go back to because I can get on a big soapbox about the way labs are used today, especially for people who are experiencing chronic health challenges. But I really am a stand, even more so than 8 years ago, for a framework versus a protocol. And we've become a very protocol fixated culture. We want the quick fix for everything, even when what we're experiencing will not be addressed by a quick fix. And by a quick fix, I mean a protocol, a diet, a supplement regime, a test that's going to tell us what's going on. So the frameworks that I've created help us to reframe how we think about our health conditions, bringing us back to those core basics or the foundation or the terrain, the soil that's going to need to be supported in order for us to heal. So one framework that's evolved since you've gone through the course is what I call 3 roots, many branches. Now, any sign, symptom, or diagnosis that we can identify is a branch. And if we envision a tree with branches on it, any sign, symptom, or diagnosis, chronic pain, the conditions that are leading to the chronic pain, branch. And we are so often fixated on fix the branch. That's what our medical system does. It's a very targeted therapy towards the branch. As a functional medicine nutritionist, and I believe nutrition isn't just about food, it's about growth, metabolism, and repair, which really is a broader realm, brings us back to not just the trunk and not just the roots, but the soil. And so I always say if there's any chronic condition, there are always 3 roots. And those 3 roots are our genes, our digestion, which is where food meets physiology, and inflammation. That's sort of a Venn diagram. But each of those roots also exists and is nourished by soil. And the soil is where, when we as patients put our attention there, we have more opportunity to help ourselves. Unfortunately, we're all focused on the branches. We're all focused on the dysfunction, and there's different ways to reverse that dysfunction or support what it is that we're experiencing that we've lost touch with. So I'm a stand for how do we bring it back to that broader realm that gives us all the opportunity to help ourselves, as opposed to playing doctor, looking for the one route, all the things that this quick fix testing culture guides us towards.
Yes, yes, yes. And as a physical therapist too, it's so funny how applicable this is, because it's like I work with people in many different realms, chronic pain, but I also see people who might have an acute condition.
Yeah.
So I just have to share the story because I literally came from the physical therapy clinic, and it was just such a great example. As I have a woman right now with like literally the most pinpoint, it is like a button-sized spot of pain on her foot that only recently happened about a month ago. And so it's not even that chronic of a condition or anything like that. And this was the second time I've seen her, but from the first time I was already like, yeah, this isn't a pinpoint. Like, yes, it's pinpoint, but there was enough to rule out as this is something up the chain. And I ended up giving her a breath exercise in child's pose. And she was like, why am I doing this? And I explained it to her, but the point was, I won't go into the explanation because it's not useful right now. But she got up and she was like, oh my God, my foot feels better. She's like, how did breathing? And I was like, because everything's connected.
That's my
And
mantra.
just needed to bring the breath back into your, into your low back, and that moved to her hips, helped her hips move better. Then therefore she was walking better. And, there's other things that we're going to do, but she kept feeding me in the evaluation these words of like, if I just slow down and pay attention to how I'm walking and walk through my whole foot, I feel a little bit better. And she kept saying, if I just slow down. And I was like, yeah, right. It was like all the clue I need. So I was like, how often do you feel like, are there other areas in life where you feel like you need to slow down? And she just laughed. She's like, everywhere. And I was like, okay. So
Yes.
Right? Like, it's like it's amazing how much our words or our patients' or clients' words tell us so much, but she would have never picked it up on her own.
Yes.
Sometimes you need that
Yes.
third party to say it back to us. And she's like, okay, I get it. Okay, I'm going to work on
Yeah.
slowing down.
Yeah, and the phrase I often use is slow it down to speed it up.
Yeah.
And I think when we're looking for quick fixes, we want the speedy solution, but the speedy solution only leads us to, like you were saying earlier with the tests, it's first of all not a solution or a resolution, maybe bringing some temporary relief, but not that sustainable relief. And it costs a lot of money, and we put the time into it. And then we just gather more and more frustration about what's not working. And that's who I really see, personally and in the evolution of my work are people who have been there and done that. They've seen all the top practitioners, they've paid for all the things, and they are angry. And that anger is also not conducive to healing. They're angry because they have invested all of this money. And I'm not saying there's anything bad about those protocols or those methodologies. They may just be too much too soon, not the right thing for that individual. You as an individual may overlook aspects of who you are and what you need. And this is where those quick fixes aren't individualized. And that means they're not functional,
Mhm.
even though they say they are. They're not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so with you too on the protocols. Often it's like the wrong place, wrong time, or wrong person, wrong time.
Yes.
There's so much of that. It's like it's not like it's inherently bad. It makes actually a lot of them make a lot of sense, but
Yes.
trying to, I mean, even heal your gut with all these
Yes.
fancy things and detoxes, but you can't poop properly, you're going to run into
Correct.
issues. Like you can't
Exactly.
um start trying to strip your body of things if you can't then, or you can't try to detox things if you can't get it out in the first
Exactly.
place. It's like you'll actually make
Exactly.
things worse.
Exactly. Yeah, I say the non-negotiable trifecta, the place to focus first is sleep, poop, and blood sugar balance. And if those things aren't in order for you and you're trying to do next steps, whatever those might be, you're
Mhm.
building on quicksand and you're not going to see the results you're after. And those aren't commands. Sleep and poop and blood sugar balance are very individualized for each of us for a
Yes.
number of reasons.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, before I go into, let me ask you, how then do you go about with someone finding that individualized piece? Because I think this is the hardest part, is that people are trying to find it to themselves, or trying to, piece together random things that they saw on Instagram or random things that they read. And it's like, it's so amazing that we have so much access to information. But in weird ways, it's made things a lot harder. I mean, I'm curious to hear
Yeah.
if you've noticed a huge difference, but
Yes.
like, even in the short, I've been doing this work for 12 years now with chronic pain, but I will say there really is a shift in who I see or how they're
Yeah.
coming in. And yeah, there's almost a lot more layers to now work through, because it's almost like an undoing of all this information that I'm like, it's not, I mean, there's some information that's just wrong. But like most of the time it's not that it's inherently wrong, it's that it's not for you. It's
Correct.
you're trying to read information that might work for somebody who's a diabetic, for instance, but you're not a diabetic,
Yeah.
or vice versa. Like it's just misplaced.
Yeah.
And then to undo the mindset pieces around, like, that's the part, I mean, I love working with it, is like undoing kind of all this misinformation that
Yes.
doesn't work for your body. Like, even someone who, slowing down is such an important thing, but I've also worked with people who actually have almost been stagnant in their lives because
Yes.
of their chronic pain. So actually slowing down and resting isn't what you need. You actually need
Yes.
to get up and move and push yourself.
Right.
But it's like, no pain, no
But
gain.
slowly.
Yeah, but yes, but slowly, of course, right? Yeah, yes, 100%. But it's like, it's okay. You're not a fragile flower. You actually
Yes.
are, you're safe to actually get out and move. Whereas other people, you're like, okay, you need to chill out.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Totally.
so you mentioned the narrative piece. I would love you to
Yeah.
speak more. Sarah, say the name of it again, because I haven't heard that.
Medicine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Can you speak more about
the mantra to everything I do is everything is connected. We are all unique, which you're speaking to, and all things matter. So
it? Yeah.
everything comes under that mantra. Everything's connected. We're all unique. All things matter. as I was moving further and further into the field, and really, at the forefront of the field of functional nutrition, I was recognizing that we were paying more attention. I have a cat visiting us, so
I actually love it. That's amazing.
she might poke in. I was recognizing that we were getting more and more attuned to the everything is connected. This is systems biology. And I do think there's more attention to systems biology. We know the gut's connected to the brain. We know that hormones are connected to the detoxification pathways, or at least we could know that. We should know that, which are connected to the gut. So we have a better understanding of systems biology. Everything's connected. We also get very fixated on the final piece, all things matter. So we think like our diet matters, our sleep matters, our tracking of all the things matters, right? So we've gotten very fixated on those to-dos. But I realized that what was missing so much was that we are all unique and how we honor that for ourselves. And that's the story. That's the story that we bring as patients to our healthcare situation. So I went on this quest to understand, like, where is the story honored in a clinical practice? Where does that matter? Because it does. It's a huge piece of it. In functional medicine and functional nutrition, we have the timeline, and I really teach into how we understand and do motivational interviewing about that individual. It's a step a lot of people just want to pass right over, but for us, it's really a huge part of the equation. But this all led me to finding the practice of narrative medicine. It's a newer practice. It's only in its 20s. It comes out of Columbia University, but it is now practiced more widely across the globe. And it's a very pedagogical and academic practice. I've written an article, What Narrative Medicine Means to Me, on my personal website, but it allowed me to understand, how do we sink into the patient's story and what's the science behind the patient's story in clinical outcomes? Is there a connection there? And what is it, and how do we cultivate it as practitioners? But also, I'm interested in, how do we give those same tools that we practice in narrative medicine as clinicians to patients to be able to listen in to themselves, instead of seeking everything outside. What does my ring say? What does the scale say? What does the tracker say? What are all the things? Really slowing down and feeling what this means to us. What is my body trying to tell me? And so the practice of narrative medicine, again, it's very academic, it's very pedagogical, but it's really about close listening and really honing in on how we pay attention to the nuances, like you did, Andrea, with that patient who was telling you and writing, when I slow down, when I slow down, and your ability to not just rush ahead and bypass that is the practice of close listening. So that's what narrative medicine is in a nutshell. It's a practice of close listening, close reading, paying attention. We typically do it as a practice with art, because art is human. It's messy. It's not a linear, like, here's the story, this happened and this happened. It really is like an expression that, if we spend time with it, there's a lot to uncover. And exercising that muscle helps us spend time with the nuances of the human experience.
Oh, I love that so much. That's so beautiful. Yes, 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 to the spending the time to listen and being able to hear. And I think this is one of the hardest parts for people who have chronic illness or chronic pain. And I speak about this a lot, in that our body starts to feel like the very threat.
Yes.
And so it feels unsafe to listen. It's like, oh, but I don't want, right? It's like, that's my absolute favorite thing to work with, is the person who's like, but I don't want to listen because it's so uncomfortable to go in.
Yes.
And I always give the metaphor. It's like, can you imagine if you were going in for a surgery and the surgeon's like, okay, but I don't want to look at that because it's really like ugly, so I'm just going to like fix it while not looking. You know what I mean? It's almost like what we're trying to do, versus like, in order to really like know for the surgeon to know what's going on. It's like you have to be able to like look into the wound and look into the messiness and all the like guts and the blood and like really take your time to be with it and sort it out and have that capacity to be with that discomfort. And then like step by step you can start to heal things.
Yes. And sometimes I think, one of the things I'm trying to do on my personal website, andreanakayama.com, is offer free narrative medicine workshops once a quarter so people can experience this. But also, every blog I write, there's a narrative medicine prompt. And sometimes it's about allowing ourselves to just respond to a prompt or a question as opposed to having to look at the big scary thing.
Yes.
It might just get us in touch with it by noticing smaller moments. So I just am in the process of writing an article about what it means to be moved and what being moved means for healing. And so how is it that just coming into the oxytocin and the parasympathetic response and the neuroplasticity that can happen when we recognize, even from like a silly commercial or watching your child perform, that feeling of being moved and holding that and recognizing, why did that move me? And spending time with that as opposed to, or in addition to, having to look at the thing that maybe feels really, really scary. So we're
Yes.
touching that element and we're regaining that instinct to know ourselves versus always looking outside. Again, the ring, the scale, the test, like all of that information is outside of us. And we've become so accustomed to measuring ourselves based on that as opposed to looking inward.
Yes, yes, yes. I love that. And I think it's so true that we are so reliant either, and even people who don't use those external devices, it's like something to just tune into is how much do you look to whether it's a coach or a physical therapist or someone to tell you almost how you're feeling. Like I'll have patients sometimes you come in, is it moving better? And it's like, I don't know. Is it? How does your sense of it? Like, I mean, I can tell you what I feel, but like, what's, you know what I mean? It's funny to, it's funny to hear how,
Calibrate, right? Like it's a
yeah.
calibration.
Yeah, and then there's people who are attuned to any of every little thing that it's like, okay, sometimes we almost need to pay a little less attention to certain things, right? Again, the individuality to it. And it's
Yes.
knowing yourself. Am I someone who hyper focuses? Am I someone who just can't even feel? And
Yeah.
it's really counterintuitive, but a lot of people who can't feel still hyper focus on areas because we're not concentrating on the whole piece where it's almost a way of distraction from something else in many senses. But
Yeah, and I think that's where narrative medicine for me brings us out of the hypervigilance
Mhm.
or the ignoring that we're talking about here, because it's less about that pain, that body. Like it brings you into your stories in a different way, your experience. One story I love to tell, which illustrates this, is I was working with a woman in her 70s who had struggled with sleep her whole life, according to her, and was still struggling and had some other health issues that were related. She had autoimmune conditions that were kind of well managed, but the sleep was not. And she would constantly say, well, I've struggled with sleep my whole life. And I said, can you tell me the first time you remember it as a struggle with sleep? Because if you're saying I've struggled with sleep my whole life, what does that mean? Like, when did
Yeah.
you know it was a struggle? What is that actually like? And she told me this whole incredible story. She sent me a photograph of her childhood home. She talked about where the windows were, what would happen when she was trying to fall asleep because there was no curtain on the window between her house and the neighbor's house. Nothing ever happened, but it didn't allow her to feel safe and go into that parasympathetic rest and digest. That gave us a whole different insight into where to focus our attention on that like ability to rest and trust. And as we were talking about it, she was able to say, actually, that's the same feeling I have in the passenger seat of a car because she doesn't have control over something.
Mhm.
And so, wow, different problem to solve than magnesium or melatonin
Mhm.
for her sleep, and just a different conversation. So it takes the fixation off of, I can't sleep. I've always had problems sleeping. That's my narrative. Always. This has been my
Mhm.
problem, or that hypervigilance, and into a different angle
Yes.
around that experience.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Wow. What a cool story and what an amazing thing to uncover. And so I am curious in terms of this is kind of going or switching topics a bit,
Yeah.
but I feel like there's so much more, like you said earlier, it's like there's so much more awareness on how everything's connected. And I feel like there's a lot more education and whatnot. But yet, I'm again curious what your stance is on this or what
Yeah.
your viewpoint is on this. I feel like the availability of good food and somehow what's being provided is only getting worse.
Yeah.
And as a parent to a 7-year-old, I'm just noticing that more and more of what is up with this? Like, what is your sense that is up with this gap of like, we have so many more people who are aware of good food, and yet our ability to access it is only, it's getting, I don't know, it feels like it's getting harder. Maybe it's not, but.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like too, there's so much information
Mhm.
and yet people are getting sicker all the time. So, like, there's a lot of divides or
Mhm.
divisions
Yeah.
between, and I know you've been like sitting in the political world, but
Yeah.
I feel like access and reality are really up right now in a lot of arenas in
Mhm.
terms of what it means to be able to have access, to even be able to think about making changes to the way you eat, whether it's
Mhm.
access to whole or real food, or whether it's access to be able to think about those things because of your own experience in your body or with your body. And so I feel like we've really narrowed, I almost feel like nutrition has become a dirty word with
Yeah.
body positivity and with the anti diet culture, which I think are really important. And I think nutrition has a place in those conversations, but they've become polarized as if one is bad because it is about the exclusion, the diet, the limiting, as opposed to something that's about healing. And so I feel like I'm a real stand for what I call the democratization of functional nutrition, which means that we should all have access and it doesn't have rules around it, like you have to shop at Whole Foods or the farmer's market or only eat organic. There are
Mhm.
ways to think about these connections and influences on our body that aren't about privilege and access alone, but it's become that way. So we have more processed foods as we have more awareness, and they're at odds with each other. Just
Mhm.
recently, there was a whole blow up about processed foods not being bad and being okay in the media and in a lot of mainstream media. And so now there's a division between ultra processed foods, and whole foods. Like it just keeps getting driven by different industry standards is how I'm gonna say it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think you spoke to something that's so huge is this polarization and these divisions that are happening. And I feel like there's so many things, politics and life, but let's talk about it, keep it with food right now, of that things feel like they're contradictory to another, but they're not. You can love your body at any size and choose really beautiful, nutritious foods for it. Because I think sometimes body love is a really hard concept for people. So I just talk about it from a place of body respect. Because you can respect
Yes.
someone you don't even like. It's just we can be respectful. And so I talk about respecting our bodies, and if our bodies are having trouble digesting something or we eat something that doesn't feel good or leaves us feeling cruddy the next morning, then how can we eat foods that feel nourishing? whatever that happens to be for that person. And the reality is, for most people, processed foods don't leave them feeling good. It's tough for your body to digest. It's harder on them. Doesn't mean you can't, I was just on vacation. It doesn't mean like, okay, we're stuck here and I'm going to pull something out of my backpack and give it to my kid because it's easy and I'm not going to buy the $15 whatever at SeaWorld or, you know what I mean? Like, here, take the prepackaged item. But yeah, it doesn't, but it's not something that we're choosing on a daily basis.
And I think it goes back to this individualization and a conversation we can be in with ourselves about risk and reward once we've tuned in, not with hypervigilance, but we know, wow, I didn't feel good when X happened. Okay, that's my choice. That's my choice to have if we're I'm going to say fortunate enough not to have extreme situations occur, like somebody with celiac disease is just having to make a removal of a food category. Somebody who might feel sluggish or not feel great is making a risk reward decision. My son, didn't grow up eating gluten. At a certain time in life, decided to reintroduce gluten into his life. He knows if he eats certain kinds of food, it's going to make him feel kind of sluggish and tired. But he doesn't exclude them. It's a risk reward decision that he's making for himself. So if he can get a gluten-free bun on the burger, that's his choice to go for. But if he's out and about and there's some really good Asian restaurant and they have noodles that he wants to eat, he's going to do that. And that's a decision because he's lucky enough, I'll knock on wood, not to have major symptoms from consuming that food. So I think there's also a spectrum. And once we're aware of what something does to us, I can't eat gluten and have that same, like I will not feel good. And so risk reward for me is the risk is higher than the reward of the flavor.
Yeah.
That's a decision I make, but not one that I'm going to demand other people make for themselves.
Yeah. While we're on the topic of gluten, I'd love to hear your kind of stance because it is something. So my son, he has ADHD and, we have tried so hard to do gluten-free. And it is, especially since I went into parenting being like, I'm going to, feed my child perfectly, which obviously hasn't happened. But, even I have the ability to pack his lunch every day. You know what I mean? Like I have complete control over his food. And yet somehow it's amazing how challenging it is.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I'm personally like currently struggling with, and I'm sure there's a lot of other people because they've heard things where it's like with gluten, with certain things, it really does take being completely gluten-free for a period of time to notice, hey, is this impacting my symptoms or not?
Yes.
And, we might make it like 2 weeks and then it's like we go to school and they're like, oh, so-and-so whatever, whatever. Or he just found something and ate it. Or, there's always something that we can't seem to make it more than like a week or two without, or grandparents feed them things because they don't, as much as I have tried to educate them and they'll like buy gluten-free bread, they'll do all this thing and then they'll just give them something that's like blatantly gluten because they just like don't understand. You know what I mean? I guess the question is like, how do you know if something's making a difference? Like when is it worth really like nailing down and being like, I am restricting? And how intense do people need to be about that restriction to notice, to like give it a fair chance, I guess? Because I'm like, I'm not sure if we've given it a fair chance or not.
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on how big the problem is and what kind of driver it's going to be and what kind of impact it has on the individual and the family. So I've certainly worked with teens that would benefit from a gluten-free diet, and I'm not about to impose that on them. And I've worked with teens who I will impose a gluten-free diet because of the extreme nature of what they're experiencing. And, I'll make sure they have the skills to do it and can follow through and the family support and the ability to talk about it. But I think we have to be really careful about who is this? What is the impact on the family and the people around them? And is the impact of the exclusion or addition
Mhm.
worth what we think can be the benefit? And I think with something that is probably fairly managed ADHD, it's hard to go all in. Like I'm saying, if it was celiac disease or my son's apartment mate now, who's one of his closest friends from college, has an anaphylactic dairy allergy. So she will be in the hospital
No,
if she
yeah, for sure.
dairy. It's
Mhm.
not about like, well, I exclude it because I get
Yeah.
constipated. It's like she will, she what
Yeah.
doesn't eat out. She has to ask tons of questions.
Mhm.
If he has dairy in the house, he has to be really careful about what surfaces he's using, what utensils he's using. And that's a different situation. So I feel like it really is situational in terms of how far am I going to go and what's the cost to me? Again, risk and reward. If you're experiencing chronic pain, just as an
Mhm.
example, and we know it's inflammatory in some way, we can see the you can feel the
Mhm.
inflammation. We can see serum lab results that show inflammation. It's not neurological like a fibromyalgia situation would be. It's worth trying to see if it reduces it's worth trying eliminations of
Mhm.
inflammatory foods to see if it gives you some results. And then you can take it from there and start to learn about what works for your body. But I think it's so individual in terms of how much is this impacting me and what am I willing to do for it that doesn't feel like I'm sacrificing my life because we have to
Mhm.
live. So
Yes.
I don't know if that makes sense as an
Oh,
answer, but like it's
it makes
so individual.
it's so funny because what you're saying, I'm like, "Oh, this is exactly what I tell my patients and my
Yeah.
clients about other things," right? My belief that, like, especially with chronic pain is there's certain things that my clients will have where we get it to the point where it's managed,
Yes.
and it's always like, "Okay, could I make this better?" And I'm like, probably, but is it like the amount of effort, especially in certain cases when there's, certain damage that's been done to a joint or something, or where there's been an injury? It's kind of like, I mean, there's a point where, I mean, yeah, I guess you could keep going, but is it worth it? Like, if
Yeah.
all you have to do to manage this is 2 minutes of exercises every morning, like, is it worth going down this giant rabbit hole of, I'm like, to me, no. Like, I
Right.
always come back to how do you live your life more and how do you expand your life
Yes.
out again? And anything that starts to feel like it's constricting,
Yes.
I'm always cautious. I think there are times where we got to be a little constrictive so we can open, right? It's almost
Exactly.
like the cocoon so you can bloom concept, but it's like as long as we're aware that that's what we're doing, then
Yes.
yeah. So no,
I agree.
it's
Yeah, I
super
think it's
helpful and you said it really
so
beautifully.
necessary just to know also like what can live in our gray area. So I call it like the path, the poison ivy, and because I live in Portland, Oregon, the bike lane, but
Mhm.
some people might think of it as the shoulder of the road. There might be things that like we just know I don't eat that. It doesn't make
Mhm.
me feel good. And there might be things like, well, if there's a little bit of that in something once in a while, I'm okay. It can
Mhm.
be in that gray zone. And we all need to find that area for ourselves. But I'm more about inclusion before exclusion. So,
Yes.
what is it we can do that is, like you said, broadening, widening before we have to exclude or eliminate so we have more available to us and it doesn't feel so restrictive.
Yeah, and when it comes to food, one of the reasons I started working with the nervous system and the way I do is because I would get these women who had had every lab test done. I would look at their food journals and I'm like, I couldn't even eat this well. Like I couldn't make a better food journal. Like they would be
Yes,
perfect.
totally.
And the common theme was there was so much anxiety around and fear around food. And so, I mean, they were just eating in the most sympathetic state, which,
Yes.
and I'm sure you can speak to what that does to your digestion. Um, that in just helping them breathe and touch in and chew their food,
Yes.
all of a sudden they could eat a whole lot more foods. And
Exactly.
that was all we did was like, let's work on bringing the nervous system down.
Yes.
And with that, I haven't talked about it a lot in this podcast, and I'm sure you could say it so much more beautifully than I could of why does being in the parasympathetic state or the sympathetic state versus the parasympathetic state impact our digestion so much?
Yeah, I mean, it's right there in the name behind it. And that sympathetic is the fight or flight. I always think of it as like, leaning forward. And a lot of that is in that conditioned food hypersensitivity, that obsession about things, but also that seeking that you and I see a lot of people go through. Like, where's the next thing? What should I be taking? Where's the next test? What's going to tell me what's wrong with me? That's a sympathetic dominant state that's putting your body into fight or flight. The body not only can't digest in that fight or flight response, it can't heal in that fight or flight response. So the hormones, the neurohormones, everything that's activated in that sympathetic dominant state doesn't allow for the body to rest and digest. And so digestion is the rest and digest is how we call parasympathetic state. And a parasympathetic dominant state allows us to rest and digest. It allows for the calming and the healing. It is the countermeasure to that fight or flight. And so many women who are in a sympathetic dominant state do not go back to that rest and digest. They're in a chronic fight or flight response. So again, to digest, for the body to do what it needs to do, it needs the hormones to be calm and in a state that allows for the breakdown of food and isn't prioritizing other hormones that are about safety.
Yes. Yeah. And I always like to add on it, especially with the parasympathetic state where people are like, well, I rest a lot. And really their resting is scrolling on their phone or making a to-do list. Well, it's like, I think sometimes the fight or flight gives people the idea that fight or flight means you're like up and moving, in which we have people who also are like compulsively can't just sit still. But I noticed that this is me because I fell into this. I'm like, oh, what are you talking? I'm so chill. I thought I was a chill person. I turns out I was not. I just didn't know any better. But it's like, oh, compulsively scrolling on your phone or even thinking thoughts over and over or making the mental to-do list or running through the scenario in your head of how you wish you said something different or all of that, even if we're completely still and appearing to be restful, our body's in that fight or flight.
Totally. I mean, even like shame and guilt and all the emotions and the mindset factors that can really feed our sympathetic dominant state. Um, all the triggers that we might experience, all of the ways that we respond to what's happening around us, we can feel like I can feel even coming back to work on Monday after the holiday, boom, 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 boom. And that
Yep.
ability to feel that response and just go, okay, that's what's happening, allows me to bring recognition to what that's doing to my entire nervous system. And so sometimes I think it's just that awareness, kind of like the flip side that I was talking about with what moves us. Like when we allow ourselves to sit in a moment and go, oh, that's what that is, it's allows for a different sense of awareness that helps with self-regulation.
Yeah, and I just even want to re-highlight how you said that is it's a recognition, it's an awareness. It's not a demonization that it's
Yeah.
happening. It's not like because I think that's what I see happening as people are learning about nervous system regulation. Of, oh my God, my nervous system is ramping up, and then we're just ramping it up even more. It's just so like, oh, I'm so noticing how my nervous system totally ramped up about that. fascinating. Like,
Yep.
okay. And it's just even that right there brings in the regulation of just an allowing it to happen and recognizing it. It's like that's total regulation. Then you could do anything
Exactly.
else if you need to. But yeah.
Exactly. It's really just sitting with that awareness and allowing that awareness to be something you're curious
Mm.
about, to just sit in curiosity. And I feel like that brings us back to the practice of narrative medicine. It's about close listening, it's not about judgment, it's not about an expectation as from the practitioner lens. I am not putting judgment on anything I'm hearing. I'm just holding space. I'm not sitting there with what I'm going to do next or what I'm going to say, which is the hardest thing for me to teach my students who are other practitioners. Like, you don't know the answer. You haven't met this person. Like, I don't care what they have. You don't know who
Yes.
they are. And then as patients ourselves, all of us, really sitting with that same curiosity and unknowing, like, what is that? Why am I feeling that? What is it that I'm feeling? And is there some way I can hold space for that, even if
Mhm.
I don't have the words for it?
Yes. Oh, that's so beautiful. I could ask you a million more questions, but I want to be respectful of your time. It's, as we're coming to the end here. And one, I want you to first let people know where they can find you and how to work with you or learn more from you, because I know you have a lot of amazing courses. And I will say I have taken so many courses. And so much of what information I just integrated now it's so hard for me to be like, I'm like, I don't know where I got half the stuff from, but I'm like, I remember yours and it was so beautiful. And I still remember I'm like, I'm like, I could say certain things. I'm like, but I don't know if I've just made them my own words at this point, but I know so many of the
That's
concepts. What's that? Yeah.
that's the intent.
Yeah,
Sure.
exactly. Like so much, I just know so much of the concepts that I got were so driven by that. And I only took your tiny, tiny little, it was like the baby course. And I feel like you really shaped a lot of the way I think about it with like the storyline and everything. So just thank you so much for that because you really have such a beautiful way of speaking and teaching. So yeah, tell people a little bit more about where they can find
Oh,
you.
well, it just makes me so, it means everything to me that somebody like you can take a little bit of the work even and like move it into your own world. Like that's so meaningful to me. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Over on my personal website, andreanakayama.com, people can find access to the writing, the free workshops, and that will always lead you back to the work at Functional Nutrition Alliance. So Andrea Nakayama is more patient focused, but everything I'm offering is just available. It's not like there's any course or any yet. Who knows? One day, maybe. But it's all there just to explore, and it'll lead you back to the Functional Nutrition Alliance, which is the larger part of my work where I'm training providers. We do have a virtual clinic. There's a lot going on there. But if you go to andreanakayama.com, it'll lead you to all the different places.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And two questions to end with.
Yes.
One's a tough one, so feel free to
Okay.
think about it. Or I'm curious. So one, if you could leave people on an individual level with one thing, what would it
Yeah.
be? And then two, if you had a policy change that you could make, which is very different from individual recommendations, I find, because you
Yes.
can't make a policy about listen to your body, right? Like what would it be?
Mm. My gosh, a policy change. Yeah, I mean, that's a big one, Andrea.
It is a
Good
big one.
question. I need to think about that. I mean, I definitely feel like we've lost touch with culture, our culture. I wish there was something that helped us honor our pasts, our elderly, the wisdom that comes. I feel like we're such a new, evolving, always changing culture. So, which is good in some ways, but in the
Yeah.
process, we leave some things behind that I think have deep meaning. So, I'm not sure what the policy would be, but it would definitely recognize that there's wisdom in where we personally have come from, our lineage, our cultures. So let me think what that policy would be.
Yeah. No, I love that. So interesting that you even went there because I was like so different. I like, yes, yes, yes to that though. So much wisdom, so much wisdom.
Yeah, that could like overarchingly inform so many of the things we do, business, policies, politics, all of it. And then, one thing I want to just ask people to play with, like I feel like nutrition isn't about rules. But there are some principles that I think are really simple that I'm just going to share because there are principles I would say apply to anyone and can be adapted in any way. And the first one is fat, fiber, protein at every meal. That's going to help with our blood sugar. The second one is eat the rainbow. And that's super fun, especially if you have kids. Just play. What colors did I eat today? And the third one is to start to get familiar with your yes, no, maybe list. What's true for you? So I feel like if I could ask everybody, put down the diets, put down should it be keto, intermittent fasting, working for this person, that book, that influencer, that TikToker, whatever it is, put it all down and just embrace these principles. That I think is the one thing I would ask everybody in relation to what they put into their body.
Yes. Oh, so beautiful and so well said. Awesome. Thank you so, so much for being here. I've so appreciated having you. I've loved this conversation.
So much fun. Thank you, Andrea.